you, Ashley. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing. While both of you were talking, I was writing down like I don't even know what to say next. So many thoughts and connections and offshoots. I mean, one was just like the high function, how we're all high functioning, right? And like that's why I was never, ADD was never even brought up at all with me because I was a girl who did well in school, and that's just not no. If you're a girl who does well in school, you don't have ADD. Like that's just not, yeah. And when I was, diagnosed with it and it kind of was all making sense, and told my family, they were super surprised too. They were like, no, you don't. Like, what are you talking about? And that for me was a little bit like, and then they personally felt bad. Like, well, how come we wouldn't notice it? Like, all of this stuff. And I was like, if I was a little, it was just a little bit like whatever, like this is about me, like I don't care if you knew or not, and if you believe me or not, like this is what I'm telling you, like this is like let's talk about it. And now we've talked about it a lot, and now we understand, and but at first it was, yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to like wanting to be validated maybe. And validating yourself.
Like a side note. Oh, sorry, Joyce, were you saying something?
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I feel like that's a very common response to someone coming forward with their mental illness, especially like from people that are close to them. It's like people need to realize that when somebody comes forth and say, hey, like I have depression, I have anxiety, blah blah blah, it's not an attack on you. Like we're not blaming anybody. Like especially I think parents feel that. They're like, well, why, like you said, like what, how could I have known, like why are you blaming me, like that kind of thing. I mean, obviously it doesn't, they might not say it outward like that, but sometimes you can tell that the wheels are turning, like where did I go wrong. And like that's not really the response that we want, right? It's just like it's just to be seen and to be heard, and just say like, okay, like let's deal with it, right? It's not like we're not pointing fingers, it's just there, it's just a thing that's there. And I feel like for me, because like I got so good at hiding my feelings, I think I also got very good at reading other people's feelings, because I could see how other people were trying to hide. And so I became very empathic, and I like really deeply feel like other people's pain. And so that's another reason why I really hid it for a long time, because I was afraid to like cause pain to other people. So yeah, like we don't want our burdens to like become burdens on everybody. Well, I shouldn't call them burdens, but like we don't want to like, we're not like saying like my struggle is because of you, or you need to help me with my struggle. It's just like, hey, I'm struggling. Like that's it. Like that's it. That's like, just listen. That's it. And I think, people always have good intentions and they want to like, solve it for you, but that's not the point of having these conversations, I think.
Yeah, it's never like a blame thing. It's, everyone's just doing their best, and like it just, life is hard, y'all. Like I think that's just what it ends up being. And yeah, I'm overly simplifying it, but I think I like can totally relate to you, Joyce, because like I also am just so hyper aware of other people's feelings, like to my own detriment.
We're all very empathetic. Yeah, and it gets in our way sometimes.
Yeah. It 100% does. Like I'm forever yes woman, because I don't want to like make anyone feel like I'm not helping them or I don't care or whatever. And I do care. Like that's just how I am, right? So I totally hear you on that. And it was something actually, Sam, that you were talking about. And this is kind of a side note, but one of my closest friends, she's in her early 40s, I think, but she was just diagnosed with ADHD as well. And it's so fascinating because like with the doctors that she's worked with, that did finally diagnose her, they were saying that like women usually, like just like you, Sam, like women usually are never pegged for having ADHD, but then like if you know, my friend, she's like in her 40s and she finally figured out, and she's like, I feel like a new woman. Like she is on medication now, and like she's just like, I am like textbook ADHD. And she's like, it's just such a shame that I had to be in my 40s to figure this out. Like I've had this for my entire life. So anyway, just like complete side note that is just like a community of people that doesn't get attention, because like you said, like when you're a high performing woman,
it's overlooked. It's totally overlooked. Like, oh, I would fidget all day in school. Like nobody like I'm this like tiny little girl sitting like curled up in her chair and then moving up, but like nobody cares. Like, you know,
I mean, she was like she was a D1 athlete, like,
oh, wow.
you know, lived in cities, like had great jobs, great career. And it took a pandemic to figure this out.
Well, a lot's, you know, definitely a lot of personal journeys during this time. And shoot. Oh, what I was gonna say too is like what ended up happening with my doctor kind of helped me point this out, but because I also have a lot of like struggle with OCD, you know, obsessive compulsive disorder, and when I was younger, it was more like ritualistic, and I kind of forced myself. I was, I guess, maybe lucky that I was able to do that, but you know, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Stop it. And I kind of was able to get somewhat control of it, but the not ritual stuff, the stuff that's just like obsessive thoughts and going over things over and over again. You know, my doctor had helped me realize, she was like, often because you will have trouble focusing or staying focused, but you are really like smart and successful and driven, you kind of compensate for that, you know, by feeling like you have to go over things over and over again so that you know them, so that you won't forget, you know, and just all of these things that I was like, oh, I did that, and so I was able to function, you know, and function really well. It was just a lot harder than it should have been, and that it, you know, that it needed to be. And it's interesting that it may be the kind of, that almost sounds like an offshoot of bipolar or something, but I think it's also very related to ADHD, the kind of ups and cycles of up and down, which I guess could happen to anyone too. But that actually got much worse as like a standout. It just, you know, I'm almost 29 now in just the past couple of years. And then that's what really prompted me to kind of seek help. So just, yeah, interesting all around. But also the empathy thing is so huge because I will want, it's almost like I want the room to be happy, you know, like, and I will blow it out of in my own head. And so even like living with, she's going to watch this, but even living with my aunt, who she's not here right now, but living with Jane, and if she's having a bad day or something, and like, I will just like go crazy, like, what can I do to make it right? Is it my fault? Oh my, and she could be having like 2 hours where she's actually totally fine. And she's like doing work, and, you know, maybe another hour later and she's like even moved on. And then maybe the next hour she needs some help and she wants to talk to me, you know, but I'm just like a mess the whole time. Like, I need to make this better. And so it's like, I'm almost hurting even more. And so it's like amazing that you can have empathy, and it's definitely I think a good thing, or, you know, it helps you to make so many connections with other people. But at the same time, it can be really, you know, a burden in a way.
My therapist was like, when we were discussing like my empathic nature. She was like, it's a burden and a curse because like
Yeah.
it makes you suffer, but other people kind of love you for it, which is because you know, like you care about other people and you like kind of, I think one of my sort of skills is like I know the right questions to ask, you know, the question that nobody's asking, but you want someone to ask you. Like I'm good at picking up on what that is for people. But for me, like my like I like you, Sam, like I would care so much about like is everybody else having a good time that I started to do things on my own because like I couldn't enjoy them if I went with another person. So like movies, concerts, museums, activities, I started doing everything by myself. And like people, and I would like enjoy them so much, and people are like, "Oh, you're so happy," and I'm like, "Yeah, because I'm by myself. I don't have to care about anybody else."
Like, it's so true. I've gone to concerts alone because I'm too nervous to make sure everyone's doing okay. So let me just go.
Like,
and
movie, like, did you think it was funny? Like,
yeah, I am there being like, ooh, I like, do people know that I don't have friends? But like, whatever.
Yeah, so that was like a kind of a silly way in how like that manifested. He was like, "Oh, she's so independent," and I'm like, it's a little bit more complicated than that. But like, thank you for putting a positive spin on it. Yeah,
I don't know if this has happened to you guys, but I like my empathy ends up spiraling into like 1.5 million sorries. Like I'm always sorry. And it's like you have no reason to be sorry. Like I've had to like drill that into my own head and other friends' heads where I'm just like, we can all take care of ourselves, but it's also so I'm always saying sorry. And it's
especially
like,
as women, right? Which I know Joyce and I have talked a lot. Well, and Ashley, we've all talked a lot about.
And it's like, why am I so sorry? I don't even know if I'm actually sorry.
I don't even think I did anything wrong and I'm saying sorry.
Yeah, because I haven't taken a second to be like,
instead of or like, you're like sorry.
Right. And it's like, no, you know, it actually took some of like one of my closest guy friends, he started getting really irritated with me because he was like, why are you saying sorry all like what, like stop, you know? And it's kind of like, I don't know, it's just you don't want to rock the boat, you don't want to, because you're always caring about like what everyone else is thinking and is everyone enjoying themselves. So it's like, to your
I had to do very conscious training for myself.
Oh yeah.
we all have to be like I consciously do not say sorry, and I'm about to say it and I catch myself and I say no, like what should you say instead? And I mean I that actually has been helpful because I found like, oh, I can say like I did I could do, you know, if it's work, like I can do this to learn from it or something, and I like very consciously don't say sorry. You know.
Yeah.
And so it gets easier the more you do that, but it's like it's a very, and I'm with my sister like every week, and I was like 2 weeks ago when I was with her, she was talking to I think like a male boss, and was like, oh, I'm sorry if I missed your email, like can you just tell me this information again? And it was such a little thing, you know, but later on in the day I was like, you know, you could, or you know, in general you could say, even just like I might have missed your email, you know, like he probably wouldn't say anything at all. He'd probably just be like, tell me this. Who cares if I missed it or not, if you told me already or not, you know? But if you need to find some in between, like, oh, I might have missed it, but can you tell me this? Yeah. You know, but the default's always like, sorry.
I've been editing my emails profusely. Like, do I really want to put that exclamation mark there? Or like, am I just doing that so that the other person knows that I'm like smiling and pleasant? Or like, you know, I feel like women do a lot of that, and it's something that I'm like really trying to not do. But something that my therapist sort of opened my eyes to, as like our like, I guess all of us have this like overly empathic nature, is that I don't know if this is true for you guys, but like me constantly valuing other people's emotions and well-being above mine was actually harming the other person. Because what would happen is that in my relationships, I would feel like I would constantly giving and compromising and sacrificing, and you know, I was unworthy of asking for help, or like I was doing the person a favor by not asking for help. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm the best friend ever. Like, I don't ask you for anything and I'm willing to do everything for you. But what happens is you build up this resentment and like it comes out that you can't stop it. And so I like toxified my relationships with like my closest friends and my family. And maybe like they didn't perceive it, but like I wasn't being honest with them. And the other thing that like really opened my eyes was like my therapist was like, well, say like your best friend was going through a really, really rough time and they didn't tell you and you found out about it much later down the line, how would you feel? And I'd be like, I would feel like, why didn't you trust me? Like, why didn't you, you know, like give me the chance to help you? And the other thing was like, okay, when someone does come to you and ask for help, well, how do you feel? I'm like, well, if I care about the person, I'm like so happy to be there for them. Like, I'm like, wow, they trust me. And like, I'm so happy that I can like help you out and like make you feel better. And my therapist was like, yeah, like you're robbing everybody of that experience. Like you are not giving people the opportunity to do that for you. And so in a way, it's like you're protecting yourself and like not making yourself vulnerable. So you're not really actually doing anybody favors by keeping everything to yourself. Um, yeah, and that was a real big eye opener. And like I struggle with it still, where I'm like, something really silly was like a couple, like in January of last year, I got really, really sick. There are theories about whether it was COVID or not, but like we'll never know. But like it was
You're
like,
okay.
yeah, but I got really, really sick. And it was the first time in my life where I like texted my friends and I was like, hey, can somebody like please go get me some like Tylenol? I'm dying. And
Such a little thing too.
yeah,
You
and
know.
my friends came through, like they like, you know, my friend showed up with all this medication and he was like, I knew you were really sick because you never asked for anything. And like it was really nice to receive that, but also like I felt like our relationship like grew from that. I was like, wow, like this person will like actually be there to help me. And yeah, I mean, like if the roles were reversed, I would be so happy to do that for somebody. And it like makes you feel good if you do that for someone. So um I keep trying to kind of think of it that way and like I'm not being selfish. I'm asking for help and it's like, you know, like
And I hate feeling selfish.
mhm,
And
yeah.
I'm like, but then I'm also like, but is the thought of not wanting to feel selfish like in it of itself selfish? And then I go into this spiral. And this is when I go into this, my therapist starts to laugh at me like, you know, nicely, but
Yeah,
just because like she knows so well how I go into these like spirals of that. And then it's like it never ends. And then I'm like, when? Wow.
I think I don't know, like for me it was like I had this like glorification of suffering and martyrdom in my head. I was like, I'm a good person because I suffer on behalf of everybody else. And it's like it's like this weird twisted thing where it's so masochistic. You're just like trying to
I mean, in reality, like we all are really good people, but we like also really want to be, and then it like
Mhm.
it just yeah, it like circles.
Y'all, I have the hardest time asking to watch a TV show with my roommates like once a month, you know, because I was like, oh,
Yeah.
well, what if they don't want to watch it, you know? Like what
Right.
that Joyce, I'm so happy you did that. Part of me is like, maybe we should all just share our therapist notes because
I
like,
know.
this is really helpful for me.
Well,
right
I
now.
have a lot of notes too. I have a whole novel.
Exactly. And I'm just like, because like Joyce, what you were saying just like hits home. Like I mean, even today, right? I just moved to a new place and I live alone now, which is quite liberating, like just because I am constantly like so hyper aware of like, am I getting in other people's ways? And like the reality is I'm not, but in my head, I'm just like, I can't breathe or else someone's going to be mad at me, which is like not true. But I ordered 3 pieces of furniture. Guess who carried all of them up 3 flights of stairs because we don't want to ask for help. And like, it's just so funny to me because it's like, I mean, it was fine, it's good. And I'm like, oh, I gotta work out, like, whatever. But there was one piece of furniture that I literally had to open in the lobby because I couldn't carry the box up by myself and like take pieces up. So I am so bad at asking for help, so bad at it. And so just the way you framed that was so helpful because like, yeah, like give people the opportunity to help you. It makes other people feel good and you'll feel good, and it's an excuse to see someone else. It was funny, your story about getting Tylenol when you were really sick. Like I probably would have like Uber Eats Tylenol. Like I would have been like, I'll pay the extra money and it'll just get to my doorstep and I won't have to ask anyone. Which, I mean, I there's some people that will just like intrinsically pick up on that and like just without me asking will do things for me, which is really great. But then there's a lot of people who aren't like that, and that's not their fault. It's not that they're a bad person. It's just they're just not like that. And so it's funny because I was talking to a friend of mine, and she was saying that like my love language, not how I receive love, but the way I give love is through acts of service and like gifts, because that's how I'm just like, I love loving, I love love. So like all of it really, but no, it's just fascinating to like hear it put that way because it's so true. And it's just something I've always struggled with. And yeah, you're definitely not alone on that one is basically what I'm trying to say.
I feel like I'm afraid I feel like I have like a little bit different, which I just realized with both of you talking about being afraid to ask for help and being afraid to, put the burden on anybody else. I definitely relate to that. And then also like, I guess an offshoot in my mind went to how I'm also really afraid that I'm wrong about everything. And that it's like really, like I feel really embarrassed by it. And just like, we talked earlier in the conversation about like ashamed and judgment and like a failure and all of that. And so in a way, those like things connect for me. Cause I actually went through like a sub journey of all of this is how I used to have this perspective that everybody else was just like doing everything right, and everybody just like knows what they're doing. And I'm here like just totally lost and like doing everything wrong, and everybody else knows that I'm doing everything wrong, and they're just like all judging me for it. And my thoughts end up like I want to hide, and I haven't had really a lot of experience with like suicidal thoughts, but I do want to hide all the time. And now, I mean, I have a weighted blanket. Like I love deep pressure and getting under the covers and like going into like sleeping in a small bed or something really cozy. And so I have that like innate feeling. But then there's just like comfort of hiding and not showing, afraid to show any fault to anyone. And in reality, it's like, well, one, nobody knows what the hell they're doing. So I had to realize that. If I don't know what I'm doing, probably nobody else does either. And everyone is like concerned with what am I doing? And they don't really, care when about me. They see, oh, Sam, she knows how to do everything right, and so, my perspective is, very internal. And then just also realizing like, well, I also like love to evolve, and like in a way I have to be wrong and fail. Like I love to learn from my mistakes and grow. So it's like I'm terrified of that moment of figuring out that I did something wrong, but I kind of need it. And usually it's also blown up in my head, and like I'll be afraid to share like stories, and I love to share, and I'll be so afraid because like people are gonna look at me like, what what's she talking about? Like, it's so weird. Like, you know, and what I'm realizing, the more that I open up and the more that I share, is other people probably, you know, share my same fear of sharing personal stories, of course, and they end up like actually feeling inspired, you know, and they're like, oh, that, thank you for sharing, like this is how, what I want to share now because you did. And so I'm realizing more and more, like, it's funny, it's like caring less about myself and caring more, and like caring more at the same time, you know, like I guess caring less what other people think, and then wanting, and then in that way not being afraid to share or to ask someone a question. Like, I ask so many more questions now. Like, I used to be so afraid to ask questions because I'm like, they're gonna think I'm stupid because I don't know. And now I'm like, I don't know, but I want to find out. So, and so I have so much more confidence now in being like, look, you know that I know something, I have different knowledge. Like, so I'm going to ask you to like, let's share our knowledge with each other. It doesn't make me like less smart than you. It's just different. That was like a whole tangent about that, but just, yeah, I think I'll just end that thought with, I just last week, I talked to my therapist how I find comfort in imagining like being locked in a room with all my fears. And for me, that's a really comforting thought, because when I'm happy and I'm like, you have something to lose when you're happy, you know? And if I'm locked in a room with all my fears, like, I don't have to worry about it. Like, it's just here. It sucks and it's here, you know? Like, it's just, it's like, I feel so weird that that's a comforting thought, and you know, but it is. So it's just very interesting for me to realize, I guess.
I think that's a fascinating way of thinking about it, because when you first said that, my immediate reaction was like, oh God, like that sounds terrible. But then when you talk about it, it's like, that makes a lot of sense. And like, I'm sure the more time you spend in there, the more comfortable you get with your fears, the more comfortable you get talking about it and kind of like addressing those fears and kind of picking apart those fears. But one thing that I was thinking about while you were talking is, I like am trying to get to a place where I don't feel like I need to ask for permission to make mistakes. Like, I've always felt like I can't make mistakes. Like, I can't do that for no reason. Like, you know.
And then I end up not doing anything because I'm so afraid to mess up.
Yeah. Or you just limit yourself in some way. You know, you don't reach, like, you don't actually do the things you want to be doing. But it's kind of like going to your point too that you made earlier, Sam, about how like no one knows what they're doing. So like, why am I sitting here thinking I need to know how to do everything perfectly? And it's like, I have to keep reminding myself that like, even if I make a mistake, that doesn't mean that like I'm unworthy or undeserving of like love and trust and just like care. Like, those two aren't related. And then like, also, if I do make a mistake, like, I can handle it. Like, I can handle the consequences of it. Like, there is nothing that
It's gonna be okay.
It's gonna be okay. Exactly. And like, it's just like this active thing that I have to like keep reminding myself. And it's like, it's working, I think. We'll see. But
Slowly but surely.
But yeah, it's just been so like liberating to give myself permission to screw up, because like I never did, right? Like, or if I did screw up, I would you know, again, try to like intellectualize all my feelings and try to pinpoint exactly where I went wrong. And I could never find it, because there usually wasn't a reason. Like, it's just, things don't work out sometimes. And yeah, I'm kind of rambling, but it's just interesting to think that like, that's one of the things that I have to constantly remind myself. I don't think social media helps very much, because that's everyone's perfect lives. I have as Sam knows, I have a very tenuous relationship with social media.
I just post weird stuff because I can't be bothered to care.
That's the stuff that I like that. I'm like, you are expressing yourself. Like, I want social media to be a place where people express themselves without worrying about likes or views or whatever. But, you know, and I can do that for myself, but I think I'm still at a point in my journey where like, I still care, you know, as much as I'll like act like I don't care.
It's okay to care.
It's okay. And, you know, it's also interesting, like, being off of it for, you know, I will go.
And neither neither of you are on Instagram. Ashley dabbles.
I
dabble. I did that for probably 2 years. The whole time I moved out to California, at the time, Instagram had just started up, or not just started up, but like people were just starting to get more into it.
Off. Yeah.
And so, and so like at the time it was Facebook, and like didn't post a single thing. And it was really funny. Like when I moved back to DC, I would run into people that like, you know, knew me from college or whatever. And they'd be like, oh, like, how's DC going? Like you know, we've all been here a few years, like how, you know, and I'm like, no one knows that I like picked up and moved and like, did a whole thing. And like, frankly, no one cares. Like, you know, now I say that, but at the time I was always like, oh my God, like I'm gonna have to talk about how I like failed and moved back. And like,
but we blow it up in our heads and in turn, like, you know, so much. Absolutely.
So anyway, that's I grant all of you the permission to make mistakes and fail.
So I want to bounce off of what you